There you go. Oh, are we live? We are live. All right, something's happening on Twitter. It's been a mess for ages. We're just going to wait because we're not live on YouTube or LinkedIn yet. So we're just going to wait. It's amazing setting up a show again after a couple of months off. All these things that have changed, like all the time on Facebook was wrong. LinkedIn time was wrong. Like when you went to edit the event, it looked different. Okay, so we're live on YouTube, but not yet on LinkedIn, and that's one of our primary audiences. So we're going to wait for that. All right.
So this is our pre-show. You're catching a little bit of the show before the show. This is where we go la 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 la.
The pre-show.
The pre-show. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that the opposite of an after party?
Well, we call it the green room. You can call it the green room before things start.
Yeah.
Oops.
Oh, we lost one component.
All right, we're live.
When you think about everything that is currently happening, you truly have to wonder why more people aren't tuning in to listen to every word of the shit show. I mean,
people are saying that it's a show that has 4 hosts. I don't know why you need 4 people. I mean, I could say what they're saying all by myself. Why do they need to have so many people on the show? They're just losers who want to save the world. It's sad, really. So sad. Anyway, back to the news about the beautiful blowing up of bad people on their bad boats.
As far as that goes, I think we need to really ask ourselves, why would you not watch the shit show? After all, these people are the kind of people we want to keep out of America. They're so focused on stupid things, like the truth. And facts, obviously, they need to be stopped before they get a chance to wake everyone up to the poly crisis. That's when everything goes wrong at the same time.
That video. Welcome to the shit show. My name's Andrea Edwards.
My name's David Coe.
Bottom left, you have me today with slightly bad voice, Richard Bussolato.
And I'm Joe Augustin at the tail end of things. We welcome to the show that discusses the poly crisis or meta crisis or whatever crisis you want to give it a name for nowadays. The simultaneous occurrence of several catastrophic events all happening at the same time. I was trying to come up with an analogy where you're with your mistress, you meet your wife while the pimp comes to collect, and your bookie shows up at the same time as well.
Nice.
Something in there.
Or otherwise known as just look out the window.
Yeah.
Well, it's been just over 2 months since we had our last show, and we always take a break until after Chinese New Year, and it was a bit later this year, right, Joe?
Yeah, I actually, you're asking me like I would represent the group that well. I guess, yes.
Well, you are here in Singapore, and I'm sure you did celebrate.
Yeah. Excuse me. As you can tell, I got a bit of a cough going on as well, so I haven't been focusing as much on the festivities as much as just trying to not cough in someone's face.
Yeah. Well, we caught up for lunch a couple of weeks ago, and thanks for that, Joe. You're the only person I was exposed to in that time that I'm aware of. Not obviously in a public place. It could have been somebody else, but I'm going to blame you. So over the break, what's everyone been focused on, like from a professional perspective? Any major achievements? David, do you want to start?
Yeah. So Thriving at Nature's Pace finally is getting off the ground a bit, getting clearer about how to present it and everything. So this is a new approach to climate change. Was really privileged to be able to give a talk at the London Jesuit Centre. Visited one of our esteemed educational institutions as well, and other sort of spoken to lots of other people in that way. So I could do a whole show on that. Maybe I'd love to at another time when there's a slot. I think it's actually well worth talking about, because what it does, it takes the climate situation into a personal situation, which is what it is.
Yeah, right. Well, we can do that. Richard, you've been up all night.
I've been up all night. Yeah, it's been a constant feature of late, but hopefully it's drawing to a near-term close here, as we're way past the 50% mark of what we need doing in Japan, and doing that from London means you need to work all night, but that's fine.
So what are you doing? What's the work?
We're building a Japanese portfolio of stocks over there. So rather than putting it on autopilot or farming it out, we decided that was better that I sort of oversaw that whole build up. And it's been really fun to be back doing that again. The hours could be better, but it's actually not as bad as you would think to do sort of a 7-hour night shift. It works out pretty well in the grand scheme of things. It does. So.
It's dark most of the time over there at the moment anyway, so it doesn't really make any difference, right?
Exactly. And I've been going a lot up to Sweden lately, and actually it works even better with Swedish hours because you're kind of closer to Japan. So you get a decent kip between sort of 10 and 1. And then you're up and ready to go for the rest of the day. While here, it becomes a very short sleep to sort of go to bed to 10 and be up at 11:45. It's not really enough to cover your whole day. So it actually works better in Sweden. But there we are. There we are.
And Joe, you've been working with academics?
Yeah, I was doing a course. I ran a workshop for academics and clinicians as well for NUS medicine, and it was on science communication. So it was a nice way to try to do something for the side that I want to get better at doing it. You know, the whole thing about science communication. I think it's good for everybody else as well in finance and tech everywhere else as well, because there's a kind of a huge gap in the way you understand things and how your audience understands things, and many times it's a gap that's left there and never attended to, and it leaves a lot of confusion. Leads to a lot of confusion. Also leads to a lot of value left on the table because people can't get you, they can't pay you, they can't understand it.
Yeah, it's so important right now. So yeah, I'm sure. So I was determined before we started the show that I did a first run of my polycrisis workshop. Unfortunately, Joe wasn't able to attend, but it was really cool. So that was on Monday. So 15 people who I friends, people I trust came, and got some fantastic feedback. There was a couple of pieces that I just need to fix up, and get it more structured. But taking years and years and years of what you're trying to understand and compressing it down even into a day is incredibly hard work. And but you got to give yourself a deadline sometimes, or you'll never move forward. So really, it felt really good to get it off the ground. So
good.
Congratulations.
How did you feel now that it's done?
I just want to get it right. Right isn't the right word, but there's two streams of it. There's just people who are interested, and then there's the business message, and they're quite different, but there's bits that are the same. So now it's just a case of just getting it out there and just trying to run it as much as I can. People were impacted. They walked away. They've been sending me messages all week. I can't stop thinking about this. I can't stop thinking about that. So that's the move from I know we've got a problem to right. I need to do something. Felt very real. So that's what I was hoping to achieve. So that was good.
Yeah.
The first hour is like bam.
Get it all out there.
Yeah. This is the bad news, and then the rest of the day we're going to focus on at least solutions, not necessarily good news. So yeah. All right.
Yeah.
All right. And Steve attended, and I didn't run it. He didn't get to see it before. I wanted him to experience with everybody else. So he's fantastic. Sort of, as everyone knows, and I'm sure David appreciates after what you've been going through. When you do these things, you don't do it in isolation when you're part of a family.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually say my daughter is the most amazing kind of person to contribute along, because she's got this way of just telling you your shit.
Yeah. Oh, they're great, aren't they? So the other thing is, it's been such an intense beginning of the year. Beyond what you've all seen in the agenda, what got your attention in the news in the last couple of months?
For me, if I may start, basically, I think what it is the fact that all the weather reporting kind of like, the storms and all the rest of it, have lost the connection that they used to have about climate change and those other events. So it's been totally normalized. Been following the sort of storms in the US, completely crazy. What I've read out of the main news agencies and stuff essentially do not see this as part of a changing world that we are in.
Yeah, changing regime, right?
And in that way, so it's really feeding on through. And even in the UK, where we've had lots of kind of floodings and things, and basically long periods of rain along, there has been those things have been taken out, and we had lots of storms and stuff over in Asia at the beginning of the year, and those were rarely even making into the news from where I was. So I think climate change has been taken out of extreme weather events, and extreme weather events have become weather events,
which is not a good thing. Richard, anything for you that beyond?
Yeah, I think, and it becomes clearer when you're in Sweden, because Sweden is a lot closer to Ukraine than the UK is. Not so much geographically as, philosophically, and it's much more in the news there, but at a different level. And there were a few facts that actually struck me when I was up last week. They ran a documentary on television about the fighting in Ukraine, and they said, actually, you are now past the point where this war has gone on longer than the Second World War on the Eastern Front. And I was quite taken aback, and I think, that was just shy of 4 years. And we have gone past the 4-year mark in this. And it's not really being highlighted enough is the sheer number of casualties you're talking about there, and the sort of ratio which is unknown. And the latest bit sort of that was discussed on television in Sweden was a Ukrainian commander who basically said, we're changing tactics. He said, we're no longer targeting Russian infrastructure, because this is a war of drones, right? This is the stuff that does the damage. And you have a limited supply of them, even though there seems to be a lot of them flying around. However, he said, we're changing tactics from targeting infrastructure and hardware and causing economic damage to Russia to now actually we need to kill 50,000 and maim 50,000, because then we think the Russian army breaks. He said, for the first time, it actually feels that Russia, even with mercenaries and forced conscriptions, cannot replenish the losses they're taking. And we think 50,000 will do it. And that is like 50,000 people is what you're going to take out to basically achieve some kind of peace settlement on your terms. It's very stark.
Yeah. It's the human cost, right, Joe?
Yeah.
I'll be honest and say I don't really pay much attention to the news. When I'm not doing this show, I don't get much news. I just, I hear things in between. I watch documentaries and stuff like that. I move slightly outside of my usual, my usual consumption. But for me, when I was what struck me in the time that's gone by, actually, was since the last show we did was the stuff that was happening in Minnesota. And when I first heard of it, I thought to myself this is what's going to change things. Things are going to change because of this, because something's happened. I've always had this terrible thing where I say someone's got to die. It's always the kind of thing that causes a turn. And I think it was simultaneously the two things that happened that caused that change or that particular outcome. And it was the second shooting that represented. I think MAGA couldn't see themselves in the first victim, but they definitely saw themselves in the second.
Yeah. There's no making sense of that, right? So when you go back, so we obviously had Maduro being kidnapped, then we had Rene Good and Alex Precy killed in Minneapolis. We had the World Economic Forum and all the shenanigans that went on with that, and obviously Greenland. That whole conversation was in the mix right up until that point. It's kind of hard to remember that sometimes. Then all the way through to the Security Defense, whatever that conference is called, where Rubio made a speech that the EU people present applauded without actually realizing it, that it was, back to the era of imperialism. And I don't know, like because we sit out, Joe and I sit out in Asia, the whole imperialism message that's coming out of the Western Hemisphere, led by the US, right? I don't know. They're not looking at a part of the world that they colonized 200-300 years ago. They're looking at a part of the world that's basically regained its strength, and it's regaining its voice. And obviously, China's at the center of that, but India as well, of course, in a different way. But yeah, that imperialism message is a message to me of the US-led world saying we've failed, and the only way we can fix it is to become the aggressors again. So that's not a future I want to look forward to. So yeah, the other thing is I've been paying attention to the news for years and years and years, and sort of sharing it in lots of different ways. But have you ever seen a news cycle like we've seen this year?
No, I was looking back at the first few months and going like, wow, it's like a whole year has gone by.
Yeah.
I think that's exactly it. I think we've had, bring it back to the weather kind of thing, right? We've had these things where you get a whole year's worth of rain in like today. We've had a whole year's worth of news cycle. Well, more like half a decade's worth of news cycle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Heathercock Richardson is. Do any of you, are you familiar with her work? She's an American historian, and she does daily updates. She's an amazing woman. And when she said that she was getting overwhelmed, I was like, wow, okay. That's her entire job, is to sort of do a daily update of what's going on and put it in historical context. So, yeah. So, all right. So we're going to kick off. But before we start on some of the main pieces, I just wanted to highlight a couple of things that happened that I didn't put in the agenda, although I did, but in a different way. This first one, Hillary Clinton's deposition happened yesterday. And we've got Bill Clinton happening tomorrow. It sounds like it was a bit of a doozy from Hillary. Bill Clinton may be a little bit more challenging. There are photos of him in the spa with the young women. So Netflix has withdrawn its Warner Brothers bid, and that means that Paramount, the door's open for them to take over. So that means that there's going to be even less left-leaning or central media in the US, which I think is a concern. The Greens in the UK have won in Gorton and Denton. The media is focused on how it absolutely thrashed Labor. But to me, the more important message is they beat reform. And if you guys didn't know, Pakistan is now at war with the Taliban. So a new war begins. Now, most people would say good, but, let's see.
There is always a human cost at the personal level, right?
Yeah.
But even though you might sympathize with the whole idea that they're not exactly a force for good and we would be better off without them, there's still going to be a human cost for those there with the boots on the ground.
Yeah, exactly. But Pakistan's a nuclear power, so that always creates additional risk, right? So we've got Nico here. Good to see you, Nico. All right, so let's kick off. We don't have to spend a lot of time talking about this, but there's one aspect I would like to talk about. So we had the State of the Union. I can't watch it. I'm sorry. And it's just so long,
I tried.
Did you?
I mean, he reminds me of Gaddafi, honestly. And sort of continuous rambling kind of comment. And I mentioned this to a friend, and his response was, yeah, but it's America. Oh my God, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. But there's a lot of aspects
all the numbers.
To this.
All the numbers for the speech were terrible in terms of ratings, in terms of how it was rated by various critics along the way. But he did set a new record, which basically was the longest ever State of the Union speech delivered. And for reference, what you could do is you could watch The Lion King, and you still have 20 minutes left.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. But
wow.
He was talking about, what was he saying? The economy is roaring like never before. the strongest and most secure border in American history. Democrats, have been a complete disaster. These are just some of his no real solutions to our nation's pressing challenges. A lot of the commentary is really talking about the disconnect between, and Biden did the same thing. The economy's good. And people are going, but it's not. So there's a lot of talk about that. But of course, we've got the whole tariffs thing in the mix. So I don't know, Richard, do you want to sort of start? What does this all mean, for the global economy and to all of us?
I think you sort of highlighted the most important bit there, which is there is a huge disconnect, and that disconnect is growing on a daily basis. Stock markets globally are effectively at all-time highs. Housing market in the US is at all-time high, and a large proportion of the US population is basically not very happy. And you can see it in confidence numbers. You can see it in lots of economic data. And it's because you've opened up this enormous gulf between those who have and those who have not. And in that sentence, for me, is those who have are the people who can access all the benefits that have been brought by 20 years of zero interest rates effectively, and can lever up and buy assets. And those who have to use their money and even debt to buy potatoes to stay alive, they haven't had any benefit, right? And that gulf is opening up, and it's much more stark in the US than it is in the rest of the world. But it's the same phenomenon we see, that you're basically chopping away the legs from the middle class, who needs to spend all their money staying alive rather than building the dream of the future. And I don't think you end well when you have that kind of disconnect. And while it's worked out really well for 20% or so of the US, it hasn't really worked out very well for the other 80. I don't know the exact percentage proportions, but the majority it's not working for. And that's reflected very much now in the opinion polls, where a year and change into his presidency, it's not gotten better for the people who effectively, we buy potatoes because we need to stay alive. And you haven't brought any benefits for me on the street. I think it's also important to draw the connect between the State of the Union speech and the ruling from the Supreme Court. Because for the first time, really, at least in this presidency, he's now fighting from a position of weakness. And he is on the back foot. And it's not the position that he's found himself very often in. It doesn't come naturally to him. And then he comes across, as David said, it's a rant. There is no cohesion in what he says. There is no plan really for how I'm going to take this forward. It's like all the other people are stupid. It's like the kid in the playground, right? Who doesn't get his way of picking the toys first. Oh, you stupid. That for me, the increases risks around the globe, and the first victim seemed to be Iran. That all of a sudden you now have a leader in the White House who is more prepared and more, shall we use the term, unhinged. At least he is becoming much more erratic, because there's not a lot of things that's going for him. And while the Supreme Court ruling was kind of expected by most commentators, it highlights a phenomenon that I think is prevalent all over the world. When you get people into these positions of power, you might come as someone who has been selected to pursue a certain policy. But when you're inside this institution, whether it's the Supreme Court or the central bank, all of a sudden the sort of shades of history descend upon you, and actually you become part of that institution and the thinking. And I'm sure that deep inside, Trump is quite shocked that the tariffs didn't pass the test at the Supreme Court, given that there's a Republican majority of appointees.
So I shared it a while ago. There's a really interesting podcast which talks about how someone who sits in the dark triad, so that's the psychopath, sociopath, and Machiavellian, in a situation like this, how they become really, really dangerous. So that's obviously a bit of a concern for the rest of the world. But from an economics perspective, when you sort of factor in all this risk, the share markets are at record highs. what does it mean to all of us? You know, like moving ahead. I know we're all still trying to work everything out, but yeah.
I think we should brace ourselves for a period of very heightened volatility, because this is not an equilibrium. And as an old boss of me said a long time ago, markets that go parabolically higher, they don't correct sideways. I think you can have a lot of really ugly volatility around events here. And more likely than not, we are going to see a massive correction for assets. That doesn't necessarily have to take place by prices going down. It could be that inflation shoots up massively and prices don't follow. So in real terms, you're much worse off. That's one way of correcting it. But I think we should brace ourselves for a period from now on, certainly till the midterms, and before we get some clarity on the Iran situation, that this is a very, very unstable, erratic, and volatile world. Because fundamentally, and I think this is really important, I was at dinner last night and we discussed this at length. The world has effectively gone from being a positive sum game to a zero sum game, and it will eventually become a negative sum game as resources run out. Because I'm not sure we're there yet. I think we're in the zero sum phase, but people are bracing themselves for the negative sum. And what you see US policy, and this is the imperialism, right?
I think you're talking about the developed world.
Oh, yes.
Sum.
Yeah.
The world has gone into negative sum.
Possibly. I'm a little bit more optimistic than that. But I certainly think that the long-term beneficial tailwinds we've had since World War II, effectively, of economic prosperity and each generation being significantly better off than their parents, has stopped. It's tangibly so. It has stopped. Young people in London cannot afford to live on their own. That's a pretty clear sign. But in this world where you think the resources have run out and the fight for them becomes more intense, and I think that's totally what you see US doing in Venezuela. That's what they're positioning themselves for doing in Greenland. It has nothing to do with national security. They already have a base there. They could beef it up tenfold, hundredfold if they wanted to. This is about an asset grab and a resource grab, because resources are running out. Imperialism is the kind of natural response. I need to secure more for my constituency of a world that's actually starting to shrink. And that inevitably is going to lead to a lot of volatility and a lot of really, really ugly stuff happening around the world. And when you overlay that with the potential shock risk from climate change, you have a pretty explosive setup.
AKA the polycrisis.
Yes. And that's what we're here to debate
exactly.
and solve.
Yeah. Anyone want to add?
I think one thing I would watch in that sense of whether we are positive sum, zero sum, whatever it is. And by the way, positive sum means that when you get together and do things, you actually get more out of it. Zero sum means that one of you takes out of what the other. And negative sum is just basically means that, you know, the tide's going against you. You're both going backwards.
Lose.
It's youth unemployment, basically.
Yeah.
And youth unemployment is just getting higher and higher and higher along. And counter to that, it's always been a little bit higher than general unemployment because young people takes time to find jobs as a starter. And the problem is there are no starter jobs anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
So I take that as kind of like, you know, when you start thinking about what that means, you're taking it from them. So if you're taking it from your young people, it's not zero sum.
Yeah.
No, that's a generational transfer, right? The people with the assets and the ability to lever up are still taking money from others who cannot do that, who are just focused on staying alive.
And the generational transfer should be going the other way.
Absolutely.
It should be going from the older into the younger, but it's actually taking from the younger into the older, which kind of shows that how the older are trying to stay paddling is to sacrifice their own youngs.
Yeah. You know, this is a really interesting conversation. We should explore it more because I see people trying to bring it up, like for me, for example, elderly people, so obviously the boomer generation, should move out of family homes. There's a housing shortage. They should move out of family homes. And then they don't do it until they can't basically deal with the home anymore. As soon as the kids move out, a couple of years later, they should sort of shrink so that there's space for younger people to move into these homes. There's space for families, just as one example. But you're right, sort of the young keeping the old alive, and then you've got the whole AI mix of job losses. And Anthropic CEO, who's I think one of the most interesting people in the mix, and Joe's going to talk about AI a bit later, but he's talking about 50% of jobs being lost, not just entry-level jobs.
No,
others, well,
I would be far more worried about senior roles, right?
Yeah.
I actually think, and this is from someone who has not got a great understanding like Joe of all the ins and outs of AI, but what I see and what we work with and what I use, I think you've kind of made a lot of the easy gains that would potentially hinder youth employment, entry-level jobs, because now there's a machine that can do it for you. The next phase is going to be all about real cost savings, and then you don't go after entry-level jobs. You go after senior positions that actually can be replicated by a machine, and that's going to have a much, much more profound impact on the economy at large.
Yeah, and then you've got no one in jobs to buy products or services, so it just doesn't make any sense. And that's the thing for me. It's like there's a solution here. We're not even talking about it.
I think you need it to break in a way, and that's what people are afraid of, because the asset rich is afraid of that.
Yes.
And they're not going to allow it to break in that way. And so what you have is a situation, the stock markets and the asset markets are really still very highly priced. The stock market just keeps going up constantly all the time. Is it going to break? Is it going to be volatility? Whatever it is, it's carrying on in that way. I think it'll carry on as long as Trump has his kind of impetus to continue in this way. I think a lot of it lies behind in there, in that sense, along with that. But the problem is, when you start doing this, is that the economy is no longer something that serves people. The economy is there to sustain the asset markets. That's basically where we are. We've gotten a situation that very few people can actually say the economy serves me in my personal life. It's there to sustain the asset markets. That's what all the investment is for, and so on. They're not there to provide jobs that provide meaning and purpose for people in their lives. When you get a job today, it's a remote thing. It's something where you don't really interact with people anymore. It's not something where you used to have that socializing element and the place for you to discover yourself and allow that sort of personal growth. All that has been stripped away. And as Richard was saying, the next level of that AI, I was talking to some people who runs, kind of major departments in investment banks, talking about how, from the quant perspective, they don't need all these people who are the advanced, PhD quant people, because the modeling is done with an AI along with that. And these are very high level 6-figure, 7-figure people that they no longer need. And those people are finding it just as hard, if they're made redundant, to find another job. They're not going to. Not within what they thought they were good at doing and wanted to be doing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, I would be far more worried at the bank if I'm sitting, at managing director level than if I'm sitting at an associate level when it comes to the next phase of AI. Definitely. Because there are real costs to cut there if you manage to make it work. So it really is very uncertain, because there is a scenario here where actually AI proves so beneficial, so successful, it actually trumps even the loftiest of expectations. And the outcome of that is basically that you make so many people redundant that the economy at large implodes.
And
You need
I
to be on the middle path.
I think, as a personal reflection on that, in terms of the people I've spoken to recently, say since, kind of towards the end, from the end of last year to the beginning of this year, the only people who feel comfortable and secure about their lives are those who are retiring.
That's
Interesting.
quite telling.
Joe, do you want to jump in with any thoughts?
No, I was just going to address the volatility aspect of things, because I decided to withdraw some of my investments, some funds from my investments, and that particular week was a week where the price of the units swayed up and down. It was like I think it did 10 to 15% of a swing during that particular week. So it was like, there's just no way to try and get out of the market when you thought it was a good time to get out of the market before it became a bad time to get out of the market again. It's just
Yeah, I mean, you have some fairly major stock indices, because I think it's fundamentally always a big difference when you look at huge volatility in relatively small markets. But what we are seeing is huge volatility in very large markets and in very large asset. Strangely enough, out of all this stuff, the historically perhaps most volatile asset, which is oil, is remarkably steady and not moving, and seem to have found some kind of equilibrium around $65 or whatever it's trading. So it is a brand new world, even in that perspective. But it's always much more worrying when the big markets start displaying this amount of volatility rather than pockets of much smaller markets, which can become quite erratic from time to time.
Just a quick one here. We've got James in the chat saying, I like the way he's written. But basically, what can I do? Insights, please. Anyone?
I think so I've been talking about my book and stuff, and what I've actually found is that there's a real connection. So I'm Catholic, with the approach, this new approach to climate change, which is how you personalize it in essence in that way, actually connects really strongly with the message of kind of the Gospels. And in there's this thing that I've dug up and looked up. So there's this piece in there where it talks about what's called the Beatitudes, and one of them says the meek shall inherit the earth. And I looked up what that actually meant, and the meek there in that word was a Greek word originally about people who hold their own in spite of what's around, that they follow their own path without having to be swayed and be bothered by all the mess and things around. And those are the people who shall inherit the earth. Essentially, that in this very volatile time, you need to draw to who you are, understand your path, and stay along with it. Obviously being sensible about it. You're not trying to headbutt your way through whatever it is. So that, if you get swayed one way, you go back to it. If you get swayed another way, you go back to it, kind of thing. As opposed to trying to find the safe thing, because there is no safe thing. If you try to find the safe thing, you're going to be lost. You're going to find that you've been turned 360, and along the way, you've been knocked about in every which way, and you don't know which way to go anymore.
Do you either of you know who James is?
I think James Atkins, Richard and I know.
Okay, all right. So you understand the context of what he's asking that question. I think what you've just given us is a really nice framing of it, David. But like when you think of people who invest money or their pensions or all that sort of stuff, like we've talked about this before in lots of different contexts, but I'm sure if you've got the appetite to navigate a market in turmoil, great. But if you're not that sort of person, so I suppose it's where people would be saying, well, this is where my wealth is today. What should I be doing differently? Or I don't know, just any of those, but maybe within the context of James.
I mean, for me, it's do what you do, but not too much.
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, it is basically that. Whatever it was that got you onto the path you are, there's a reason for it. So do what you do, but not too much. Don't think this is going to work along. And so what you then do with the not too much is that means that there is a space, and that space is what you lean on to actually say, okay, who am I really? what am I really? Because whatever you are that you're currently doing, if you are that mid-level or top-level managing director, as Richard was describing, you're going to be coming out and thinking, hang on a minute, what is my real purpose as opposed to what is my real skill? That distinction is really important as we go ahead into a world where, as I said, we've had half a decade of crazy news coming along in the space of a month and a half. So really, my skill is going to be easily displaced. So the economic promise that if I develop a good skill, I can stay with it and it'll always be valuable, that's what's being taken away. And that's why I think it's negative sum. And my real purpose of what I actually feel I want to get out of bed in the morning and do, and then you end up at the end of the day and you say, how much of what I've done actually aligns with that? That's where you begin to find some kind of kind of peace and purpose in that way.
All right, so we're going to move on to the next topic, but the other thing that I would definitely say is we have to face the truth and the reality of this time. And a lot of people aren't willing to do that. They're not willing to look it in the eye. And by not looking it in the eye, I've got some insect flying around me. You can't make the right decision. And I think that's something I see all the time. People dreaming of a future that I know no longer exists, and no one wants to talk about it. And if you bring it up, people don't like it. They censor you. So you find yourself censoring yourself. But that's the truth. We've got to look at the truth of this time, because it's not just Donald Trump in power. It's all of these different aspects that are coming together. We're going to talk just very, very quickly about, obviously, we can't not talk about it, the whole Epstein files. So that was, from a media perspective, it's been a pretty interesting journey. So 3 million documents were released, and within 24 hours, there were hundreds of thousands of opinion pieces about it, which to me is just the classic problem of our time, that everyone thinks they've got to be quick to an opinion, and it's actually the long considered opinions which are worth paying attention to. People who really take the time to, cross the I's, what is it, cross the T's and dot the I's. So one of the big things that's just starting to come out is a whole bunch of files have not been released, and they've got the numbers, so they know them. And these apparently show that Donald Trump has raped this young 12, 13-year-old girl. My feelings and thoughts are always with the victims of this abuse. But I think what's happening in the UK, across Europe, in Australia, and obviously in the US, businesses and academia heads are rolling. I think once this momentum keeps going, I do think that there are going to be bigger outcomes, but we're a long way from it. But any thoughts of? I mean, just Richard and David, you're sitting in the UK. I mean, the media must be just overwhelmed with the whole Mendelsohn and Andrew stories. Any thoughts?
Yeah, Richard.
I think for the UK, obviously, the whole Epstein affair has, moved on and been cranked up a notch. You've gone away from basically a ring of sleazy old men engaged in some form of pedophilia to having effectively an open market for state secrets, because there's no doubt that if these documents were leaked, they were leaked for an economic benefit for Epstein. And the question, if he could coerce people like that so easily, how many others have been involved in effectively enriching him because he managed to effectively trade on inside information with regard to some of the things that were going on an institutionalized level. And I mean, I don't know what the scales will be in terms of punishment for doing this, but the way you look at it is effectively it's treason, right? You go to jail and you never come out. This is treason. You know exactly what these documents are when you are letting someone who is unauthorized have a peek view of them. Or even worse, it's not like, oh, I'm going to leave a file here, go and have a look while I go to the loo. I'm actually sending you an email with the stuff, or I'm dropping it off in a brown envelope. I mean, it's treason.
So that's Mendelsohn and Andrew both.
Yeah.
Yep. And what's the punishment from treason in the UK now?
In wartime, it could even be, death penalty, but we're not in wartime.
Yeah.
But I think the scale goes all the way up to life imprisonment.
Mm.
The question is, how serious are these offenses? Well, it's going to be very different depending on the person looking at them. But I cannot see if what on the face of it seems to be effectively a treacherous act can go unpunished without actually going into custodian sentence, because otherwise you make a mockery of the whole thing.
Mm.
So life imprisonment is sort of the penalty, I think, since 1990, mid-1990 or something. The death penalty is abolished for treason.
But not in wartime. Not in wartime, right?
Well, I'm not sure we're in wartime at the moment.
No, but
but technically, 1990, in like 1992, it was up to that point, death penalty was still in place for treason. We weren't at war then.
No.
The death penalty was still pretty widespread around the world
until probably cross of the turn of the century, as it were. But I think the situation, actually, I mean, there are two things here. That one is the monarchy, and the other is the implication actually on a Labour government. The way this is really taken in the UK is that it has much more of a Labour element, because the right-wing press, the Conservatives and the Reform part have very much taken on to this. And the situation that Keir Starmer is finding himself in is really difficult. The Andrew situation is very much a question of saying, how much is this really going to impact, that place for the monarchy? It was shaky to start. It has come on through. Charles is kind of beginning to be recognized. But you've got the problem of, different parts of that, the next in lines are not necessarily people that you think are going to be people you want in that way. So I think that it is going to open up questions of saying, okay, what's the next step constitutionally for the UK in that regards? Just to what extent do we want these sort of things? I'm not sure. I don't think there will be an abolition of the monarchy. It's far too much of a tourist attraction for the UK to do that, to put it plainly. But that sort of role and privileges definitely is going to be reflected. Charities, do you want a monarch to be your patron? Someone who's next in line to be your patron in that way? It's not at all clear. I think one thing that we don't really reflect enough about is, why do these people who have absolutely no real need to be involved in something like that get involved in something like that?
Yeah. Well, Joe, I'm going to put you on the spot and
Okay.
get your view because it's big. It's Israeli Mossad ties, Russian ties. It's not left. It's not right.
If you look at it and you assume that it is spycraft at work, then he is probably one of the most successful operators there's ever been, right? I mean, he's been able to get access, been able to exert influence, been able to amass a good fortune as well personally while doing the whole thing. And if you think about the area that he was in, I mean, he's sort of the treacherous friend, you can't afford to cross if you've partaken of the fruit, if you know what I mean. So, I mean, if we're viewing it purely from a perspective of someone who is in that business, the business of influence, Epstein was remarkably effective, and I mean, really just how intricate the web of control is, and to work on different aspects of it. I mean, I think I've no doubt that different people who were involved with Epstein were involved with a different Epstein. You know, it was always the right flavor, the right person, the right thing. You would have had the families who went to Epstein Island thinking that this is just a nice trip out to Sentosa. It's kind of something really special, and it was kid friendly, and it's one of those things where you when it's done effectively and really well, people don't realize they're in the cauldron that is warming up. They're like the frogs that get boiled. Right? I mean, that whole idea, even though it's proven not to be scientifically correct at all, but the idea is, that they're in that environment. Everything is warming up, and they just suddenly begin to cook.
Yeah, I think the swimming pool with the naked underage girls was in a different part of the island to the ones that the families visited. But and it's really hard to see between this, and you kind of wonder if he wasn't a pedophile. I mean, some of the stories that are coming out, I don't know if they're true. None of us do. Some people believe they're true, but one of the interesting things to me is the whole MAGA doesn't care if Trump was involved. But they care about everybody else that was involved. I think the association with him, there's a lot of heads rolling who basically turned up at a charity dinner. So there's a lot of people having their credibility questioned. It's kind of like the Me Too movement on steroids, and there was a backlash from that. So what's the backlash from this going to be? So we need to be keeping our eyes open to that, because backlashes don't tend to be positive things. If it's a positive backlash, that is a good thing, but clean up. We've always known about these webs of power that sort of operate in the background. He just seemed to operate too much in the foreground, perhaps. But we're not going to have time to go through everything that I obviously had on the list, but there's a piece in The Shot, and I'm just sharing it now. Now, The Shot is obviously not the place you go to for high geopolitical content, but actually, if you're paying attention to it, there's some pretty good stuff. Anyway, it's called, and I'm going to swear, Collating the Recent Escalation of Fascist State Fuckery in Australia. And it goes through all of these things that have happened or are happening, sort of border security, anti-Semitism training, the whole Writers' Festival in Adelaide. Did you guys see that? They basically said this Palestinian writer couldn't speak, and basically the whole event got cancelled. In Queensland, you can't say from the river to the sea. There's all these things, and one of Theo Nolan Isles, he got locked up for a tweet, and it said, "No person who after this date intentionally causes physical pain to any politician who voted aye to the passage of the Combating Anti-Semitism Hate Speech Bill will pay for beer while in my informed presence." So that person was put in jail. Climate protesters are obviously being arrested. Protest in New South Wales is, all of these sort of things. So they're sort of linking it back to the point that it's time. I mean, obviously you got the Teal, the Palantir, all of that stuff in the mix. Governments paying. I saw a British, in the Houses of Parliament, the Defence Minister was talking about a Palantir deal and the safeguards in place and all this sort of stuff. And the underlying message is we're sticking with the US, they're our partner, that sort of stuff. But the biggest stories always for I think us, or maybe not Joe, but the biggest stories always is what's going on a planetary scale. And like David said, there's a normalization that's going on. But we've got El Nino on the horizon, and that means we're going to probably jump up. I'm predicting, based on everything I'm seeing, we're going to hit about 1.7 degrees Celsius of warming, maybe higher. We got 1.63 during the last El Nino, so I'm saying 1.7, maybe 1.8.
I'm thinking, when you go and buy your bag of pasta from the shop, pick up an extra one, and just keep doing that. Keep it in store, start rotating around. Same with, when you bag your rice, pick up an extra one. because the last time we had that with Nino 2022 type period, 39 countries banned export of their food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
But you got to be careful with weevils.
yes,
Bay
find
leaves.
a dry place, find a safe place along, dig up those old ways about how people used to store stuff, and then rotate it. You put the extra pack in the back, and then you start taking from the front, as it were, and have enough along. The world has something like 3 months worth of grain stock. The rest of it comes as a rotation of production of kind of new marketing year as it goes on through. So it doesn't take much in the way of a global heating, warm, drought type event to be knocking a couple of those out of the picture, and then you have a real food crisis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the prediction is we're one multi-bread basket impact away from global famine, and of course that's inflation too. So there's a lot going on in the media around this and in the scientific research. But one of the articles in the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists is "Deny, Delay, Downplay: How Governments Hide Climate Change Intelligence." And obviously the UK, it came up that there was a report that was released, but they redacted it. And basically what they're saying is nature underpins our security, prosperity, and resilience. And understanding the threats we face from biodiversity loss is crucial to meeting them head on. So Australia is now, there's been a big push as well to release a similar report. But I think governments have got to stop treating the public like children. There's a panic, obviously, in the potential of releasing this information. But if people are aware, they can do what it takes to get ready. Like I was seeing another piece in the UK, 1 in 9 homes are being built in floodplains.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not even in floodplains. I mean, you look at the floods that are happening around the world. If you're outside of a floodplain, you're at risk. Places that have never been flooded are being flooded, right? So the risks are huge. David?
Yeah, I was going to say I caught up with a friend who hadn't met him for 40-something years.
Wow.
So we used to be in school together, and again, he's retiring.
Feeling good about life.
Feeling good about life. Retiring people are feeling good about life. That says so much. And so he's been working on kind of building development all through. And he was making that comment about just the floodplains. And he just can't believe people do that in today's world. That they're actively going out there and saying, yeah, this is great, So I think all of this, going back to kind of James' comment about what can you do, how do you do that? I think the first thing you do is you accept this is the place, and you actually have to personalize it. You have to kind of say, if I read on the news something is going on, I have to actually go and imagine myself as saying, okay, that may happen to me too. Now, what would I like to try and do to, kind of improve my own situation? Think about what it is that I can rely on. And going back to that comment about, the meek, the meaning of the Greek word that is actually is as a strength through self-restraint in that way. You're powerful and capable and able, but you choose not to go around and thrash it about. It's the opposite of some of the world leaders that we can imagine in that way. So what you then do is you use it to guide yourself forward. And I think that's really important as something to take away. Very often, what that does, it allows you to know which action is right for you, rather than for us to say, do this action or do that action, because people have different circumstances.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I missed Phil Merry said there's a positive side to all the Epstein stuff. I'll have to get him on the show so he can tell us what that is, or if he leaves a comment. Because of course there is. There's always a positive side.
It reveals it all. I mean, it makes it clear that all of this stuff is going on. It changes. It makes you realize a lot of the conspiracy theories are not conspiracy theories.
Yeah. Well, and until we put it out there, we don't address it. But Nico, you dropped this earlier. You said the world doesn't need old leaders. What I mean, everything has a certain age. If you look at most African leaders are over 70, and they forget the technology runs the world and needs expertise. And I think it's definitely time for young leadership, to move in, to sort of be in this world right now. So another piece that started to come out just a few weeks ago, but IPBES, I can't see what that stands for, but basically it appeared in Carbon Brief, and it's also been in Reuters or Bloomberg, and it's also been on the BBC. And basically what it's saying is that businesses are destroying nature, the foundation of their business, and they're not investing in nature. So the harm that they create basically ultimately will mean that their business will be destroyed. Yep. So finally, right, that conversation's happening. So the message is businesses both depend on and harm nature. Current practices do not support efforts to halt and reverse biodiversity loss. And here's an interesting one. Global public and private financial spending with direct negative impacts on nature is estimated at $7.3 trillion. That was 2023. 220 billion is contributing to protecting and sustainably using nature. So that's the equivalent of what we're talking about. Businesses can act now to address the impacts on nature, and government policies can drive a just and sustainable future for nature and people. But the bigger message is you will have no business if you don't reinvest in nature. And it's such an interesting conversation, because everyone's like, oh, no one's going to do anything because if it costs money and they're not going to make any profit. And it's like, well, okay, then they have no business. Ultimately, we're pushing outside the boundaries of being able to live on this planet. The 9 planetary boundaries. Johan Rockström. And so basically, they're saying there is no business if we don't reinvest back in nature. So I was just happy to see that getting some coverage.
Yeah, I was going to add, I was going to post a comment in there just to kind of gloat a bit with Richard about don't forget the unsustainable truth, which was always about how our investments actually destroy the planet. And the reason is because we've accumulated so much money in our investments that it's actually a huge amount. And being that huge amount, it's now become a bit of a problem, because you can only invest in the big stuff. You can't invest in the small stuff anymore. And as a result, the big companies get even bigger along, and they need to make more things, to sell more stuff, to make the profits for us, for the people who needs it, so that they can retire. And that's not going to end in this way. So absolutely, the comment about the businesses is absolutely right. But behind the businesses is our desire for a security that we can no longer afford. I think Chitan, who we had on the show a while back, sums it up very nicely, and which is that you may be able to afford it, you may be able to afford your retirement, but the planet can't. So have a think about that. And he has this call for the Finite Earth movement. I just want to kind of give it a shout and a pledge. I'm going to try and bring it up and post it along, and it is to consider not buying any new clothes or wearing new clothes for a year. Just think about what and give it a go, because you might be able to afford it and the planet can't.
Yeah. That was really it was a really beautiful post that he shared, where he showed a security guard working in a bank. So when it comes to overshoot, on average, we only need 0.7 Earths to maintain the average lifestyle in India. So the mega wealthy people in India are obviously living in overshoot, but the average person, so a person working as a security guard in a bank, making a commitment to not buy any new clothing for a year, that person isn't the problem. It's the average Australian that buys 56 new items of clothing a year. That's a problem, But I think the recommended advice is none of us should be buying any more than 3 to 5 new items of clothing a year. I bought one dress last year, as an example. That was it. But I wanted to just ask you guys a question. So I'm going to presume that 100% of our economy relies on nature. Am I right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
What percentage of our so the where the pensions are basically investing their money, what percentage of that relies on stable weather?
All of it.
Also
Ul-
100%?
Ultimately, all of it, but
All of
that
it.
could be a long process before you get there. But ultimately, everything is fundamentally dependent on things remaining more or less the same. If you go to extremes, everything crumbles. But that would be a long process. I think even pretty smart people believe that there are companies that are better insulated than others.
Yeah.
Undoubtedly that is the case, at least in the first, second, possibly third round. But ultimately, everything will crumble when you push it to the very extreme. But the first phase will show a big dispersion among winners and losers.
I think that's not even the case. I mean, people think about it as saying, oh, if you're Nestle, then obviously you depend on the weather because you buy food and you depends on crops. But if you're a data center, you need cooling.
Yeah.
And that cooling very often is through some kind of water and some stuff of that kind. So you need it in that way. And so, it doesn't actually matter which part you look, whether it's digital or kind of real world physical. Our infrastructure, our basic infrastructure requires things to move around. So when there's a storm in the sea, the ships get diverted, you get an extra day or two along and the freight is charged per day. So your cost goes up as a result, and your goods are delivered in a delayed fashion. And the way we have our economy working is everything has to be just on time. And it's been tuned to be that. So it really doesn't matter what you look at or where you look at, the costs end up adding up in that way. And it's all invisible. It's all hidden behind a veil so that it all looks like magic. That when you click on the thing, it arrives to you so soon in that part.
Yeah.
So the stability of the weather and it's not so much the stability, it's the predictability of the weather.
Yeah. So
really
important. Yeah, it came up in the workshop the other day, and it's a question that I've been wanting to ask for a long time, because everything that we rely on, like you said before many times, David, about we've got 3 months of food, the grains and that sort of stuff. But we've moved outside of a predictable weather, and everything relies on nature. Even if it's a service industry, it's people who need food to deliver, and all the everything that comes with it. But 100% of the economy is dependent on nature, and 100% of the economy is dependent on predictable weather. But it doesn't ever seem to be at the center of the conversation. And
no, people take it for granted. That's the real problem. We take
it for granted. But our leaders don't.
No, because I think it's not that they take it for granted. It's because our leaders are elected to reassure us.
Yeah, but it's like what we're seeing in Iran. So to me, it's just a classic example, right? Iran, we've got a water crisis. We've got a water crisis. Oh my God, we're going to have to move everyone out.
Yes.
Right. Well, where are they going to go? And the journey along the way was, we have to reassure people. We have to give them jobs. We have to reassure people. We have to give them jobs. Now everyone's screwed. And that's basically going to happen on a global scale. So,
well, what it is, I'd express it a bit different. We've got a water crisis. We've got a water crisis. We've got a water crisis. Now we've got a social unrest crisis.
Yeah.
Now we go along and we clamp down on it in one way or another, do whatever it is, and then meanwhile a war is going to flare up.
Yeah.
I think that's the reality of what we're heading into, and it feels like, oh gosh, this is so terrible and stuff. But which political leader is going to say that? Which political leader is going to come up and actually say we're going to do this, and not have their opposition party go along and say, oh, you're doing such a terrible job, you're useless, of course we've got a broad crisis, we should kick you out. And this is the part where the politics feels they can control the climate. They think they can fix a water crisis when there is no water.
Oh, I mean, there's a lot of mismanagement in the mix of this. I mean, one of the stories is UN declares that Earth has entered a period of water bankruptcy. So
Yeah.
we're just using too much, 7 times more than we should be. But there's infrastructure issues. There are processes. But what you were just saying then, David, is absolutely right. It's like we've got a water crisis. We've got a water crisis, social unrest. We've got a water crisis. We don't want any social unrest. So we're going to keep telling people that everything's okay. The water crisis keeps going. Everything's okay. We don't want any social unrest. Bam, the social unrest is even bigger. So the thing that they're trying to avoid is coming anyway, but it's going to be bigger and it's going to be more severe. And by that point, all of us who are impacted in those situations are going to be in a major crisis. So they're reassuring us, and they're not being the leaders the world needs right now. Because, well, first of all, they're not being adults. They're not treating their people like adults. And all they're doing is kicking the can down the road. And we're at the point of the kicking the can down the road where the real crisis starts to come in. And it's been happening for decades. So it's not like any party's responsible for this. But I would say in Asia, there's a lot of leaders across Asia who are addressing this directly. They might not be communicating where they need to be, but they're doing in the background. So I would say that.
I think the difference in that sense to me is that, going back to the idea of acceptance and so on, is that we are still in a world mentally, in terms of kind of our cognitive wisdom, of saying, how do we fix this? We haven't yet accepted the reality that actually we have to live with it even while we try to fix it. Yeah. So we've made ourselves separated in thinking, how do we fix this? And that places us in a situation where we are in an ivory tower looking out, thinking that we are safe in this way. Those are the poor people who are going to be affected. How can we fix it for them in that sense? Mm-hmm. And that disengagement is the disengagement we see within what I find as even the climate movement, and even within the climate reporting and all of those things. And in that way, it actually makes everyone else feel that this reality is not yet here. And the politicians, they for better and for worse, they maintain a story and a story narrative that they're used to giving. And most of us have a story narrative. And that's why thriving at nature's pace is such a difficult concept for people. Mm-hmm. That's why when I talk about it to people, it's like, whoa, what's going on in this way? Because it's saying the story narrative that started in the 1970s with the limits to growth and sustainability issues and so on is no longer helpful. Because those are narratives about how we continue in this way, we will run out of space. And this is the point to Richard. We've gone from positive sum to zero, but I actually see that globally, we're negative sum now. Mm. And that matters because our economy is now fully global. It matters what happens in a far remote place on Earth. That never happened before. I think I was in the Thriving Nature Space, I was talking about Spruce Pine, a place in the US that had a flooding a year ago or 2 years ago. I can't remember the exact date. And it really made it into the news. And it was like, why should a place that has a tiny population make it into global news because it got flooded? It's because 70% of the silicon, of the sand that we use to make our advanced silicon chips come from that place. That's how connected we've become. A tiny place actually provides that much of the raw material to make the things that's in every device, from a vape that you breathe through, to the smartphone that you have, to the electronics that controls your car, and the thing that runs the military AI, whichever you want to think about it. So it all depends on the weather.
Yeah. All right. Anyone want to sort of jump in? There's lots of things that I added into the agenda. Anything sort of? One of the ones was where was it? The tundra. Oh yeah, permafrost thaw. Oh, sorry. Sorry,
Oh.
David, I'll give you a break. Permafrost thaw, which obviously was going to release methane, and shrubification have tipped Alaska's North Slope into a wildfire regime not seen for 3,000 years. And why this matters is because all of those fires are in the Northern Hemisphere. They dump brown carbon in the Arctic, and that makes the ice melt faster. So the fact that that's happened. There's a lot of stories coming out of Antarctica as well, because the scientists have only just recently left. So paying attention to that. But the other climate stuff that sort of I put in, there's plenty more. Anyone? I'll put it in the weekend reads.
I want to get to Chitan's sort of pledge link, which is in. I'm just going to try and see if I can post it into this.
So we had him on the show last year. He was fabulous. All right, so you find the link, to finiteearth.org.
Yes, so go to that and kind of see what you can and stuff. finiteearth.org. So to give Chitan a shout. He is an Indian gentleman, former professor at the Indian Institute of Technology, who's been on a 5-year of an 11-year journey around India, literally in a kind of reenactment of what Gandhi did in his journey, to talk to people about the fact that the Earth is finite. You may be able to afford it, but the planet can't. And he comes from a solar engineering background, and his story is that, he went along how people would get up solar energy. Next time he comes around, they've put in three additional air conditioners. So, our appetite to just consume has to be recognized as being at the source of our own kind of demise. Yeah. So, the finiteearth.org.
The increase in air conditioning is getting a massive attention. All right, I'm going to show you an image. Sorry to those who are listening to this. You won't be able to see it, but this is in a piece that was how it connects to every other crisis in the world today, which I found really interesting, because to me it doesn't connect to it. It's actually trying to demonstrate is showing roots of a non-exhaustive list of modern political problems. So I thought it would be an interesting view just to get your thoughts on what you're seeing here. And Joe, because you've been quiet, you can go first. Because it's a lot of what we've already been talking about, right?
Oh, he's muted.
It's just a visual form. It's just a visual form of what we've been talking about, the polycrisis, right? Everything is connected. Everything is all bound together. I was actually quite surprised to see the Epstein files in this particular illustration, but it does. It is in the end all connected, right? Something tips something in certain directions. I think the interesting thing about all this is in terms of what the big problem is, it's separate from what the prevalent or what the obvious problem to the audience is where they are. As in, what we're doing right now is we're sitting like on Mount Olympus, looking down upon everything and seeing all the problems and seeing the different things, and we go like, oh, that's not quite working that way. That's not working so good. On the ground, people aren't seeing things from the big picture perspective. And I know, again, for us to kind of think that this is what should be obvious to everyone, it really isn't. It isn't even obvious to academics. It isn't obvious to people who spend time thinking about things like that. They might have part of this diagram sort of on their mind. They can go, oh, this is one aspect of it. We're very much focused on that, but they're really not thinking about that big picture. So it's a hard thing to try to get. Let's say, for instance, like India. India is in this huge phase of development. Right? It is rising up. It is the only real economy where growth is going to happen, because all that's going to happen. They're going to have a huge need for power, right? And for them, they can be, you have the Chitans of the world going like, okay, this is all the things that we can do, but at the same time, there's an entire country that could come out above the poverty line, and in a significant way. And the way they're going to do that is on the back of coal. And despite the infrastructure problem, the infrastructure issues that they have within the India itself, because India has the coal that can drive its industrial revolution, but they haven't got enough infrastructure to get the coal to the factories or to the places where they need to use the coal in a timely way as well. So I always think it's really difficult for you need to have some sort of it's almost like you need to have the irrational revolution, because from a rational perspective, some of this stuff will continue to happen, because I'm going to have to feed myself today, so that's going to be a higher priority than saying I'm going to try to buy less clothes, from a fashion perspective somewhere else around the world. So the irrational sort of revolution that has to happen is getting people into a state where they feel so bad about things that they start doing, radical things. And that is, I think, the scary part of things, because I think if you think about society and what society generally is, it's about everyone kind of getting along and actually sort of like moving together and cooperating, right? And whereas if you start this, and I'm not saying it's not important to do. I'm just saying that's what the reality is. It is hard to have a revolution in a way that is not going to cause massive instability as well, right? So while you have this climate situation that affects us all, then as we try to maybe address the climate situation, we end up with a societal situation that also affects us all. And how do we feel about that?
Mm-hmm. No, you're. I'll jump in first, and I'm going to let you go. You're absolutely nailing the core issue, Joe. So, so India can't advance the way it wants to advance and keep a stable climate. Like, we can't do both. So Indonesia's just got a massive coal infrastructure being built. The Chinese are sponsoring it, right? It's massive amount. But if we just keep belching all this coal up, so it's all about the amount of CO2, the weather bit, right? What's happening? It's all about the amount of CO2 up in the atmosphere, heating, right? So we're going into an El Nino. Are we going to see millions of people dying in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, Malaysia? Are we? We probably should be all right here in Singapore for now, but then we're hearing all about the amount of fish, not just the ones that are being extracted by humans, but also the coral reefs have hit past their tipping point. The mass die-offs in the ocean acidification. So if you like your lobster, crab, or prawns, their shells are going to start to sort of not be able to form. So it's a case of the growth journey that all of these countries have been on, and now the last few countries want to go on. Is that something we can do?
I mean, for me, so plug my own book, Thriving at Nature's Pace. The point about it is going to collapse, and that's how the possibilities of change arise. I think we're still in the mindset of saying, how do we prevent it from collapse? How do we prevent all these things from happening? The corals have died off. Okay, they are past the point. All these things are past the point, and our economy is past that point of fragility. Just take a look at the US with the bomb cyclone. Think about weeks worth of snow. What's happening to the food in the shops when delivery can't get there over that time? There's a guy called Max Velocity with a YouTube channel, amazing channel on YouTube about weather in the US. There's another week of that coming along, another several feet of snow coming along in different regions along in there. If you're in a city, you don't produce any food.
No.
It's all moved in from somewhere along. When the roads have feet of snow, there, your shop is going to get shelves empty. That's just going to be what you face. There's no way around it in that way. So it is going to bring into all that kind of stress, because we're already stressed and anxious. We worry about our jobs that seems to be taken away and all of those things. And it's all going to add up onto that. So you have to take it from the stance of actually have to personalize it and actually be able to have that kind of, strength through restraint in that sense. That sort of meekness, what was traditionally that idea of the meekness, the prius in that Greek word, in that way. How do you have that purpose about you in that sense? And the politicians are not going to get it. I mean, the fact is they are actually not going to get it. They're still in the storyline of the past. Everything is still in the storyline of the past. The essence about the idea of thriving at nature's pace is that it's nature's pace that will determine our lives. That's what we're facing into. We want it to be at our pace. We want to be able to say, if you do this, you can make this change, you can avoid this, you can avoid that. It's not. Nature is actually coming back and actually saying, you know what? I want to be a part of you too, and I want you to be part of us in that way. So let's just get smart about this. You've been grounded for a bit. And this idea of the growth, I had a conversation yesterday. That was an amazing conversation with a gentleman in India. And he was saying India is poor because my mum buys $1 worth of milk. Out of this, she gets the cream, she makes the butter, she makes the yogurt, she makes the lassi and all of those things. The UK is rich because every one of those things we spend money to buy. So they have what we have, they just need $1 for it, and we need 10, 20. So we end up having to chase making those dollars, and they don't.
All the waste that comes with it too, right?
So which one is in poverty?
Yeah, you're right, David. It's such a complete rethinking of wealth, right? But James is making a really important point here. He's sort of talking, because I listened to the rest of his politics, especially in the recent months. I found them very good, but they're actually really trying to bring climate into the conversation. But they don't get it. They really don't. And that's the problem with where we are. So, but there are people who get it. So, how do we get those people in power, making decisions, influencing power, being heard? There was the big Monica joined us last year and talked about the event in the UK where a whole bunch of politicians sat in a room and scientists spoke to them. I mean, that needs to be happening all over the world. Climate deniers should have no right to have a position in any political system anywhere on the planet. It's just bloody stupid, right? They're not doing their job. So El Nino's coming. There was a story, nearly 80% of Paraguay was without electricity amid a heat wave. And what was really, really interesting about this story was at the time, and a lot of it was due to hydrological failure and some other issues. But at the time that this was happening, their leaders were in the US negotiating deals to build data centers, which need water and energy and also release forever chemicals and all that sort of stuff. So I thought that was a kind of an interesting one.
I do have to go back and sort of bring out this point, right? We've got all this advance in the data centers and all of those things. So between the 2 years ago and now, tremendous growth has happened in that area.
Yeah.
In there. How much has your own personal life critically depended on that being there? Because at the end of the day, when the economy becomes robot, doing all the actions and doing all the activities in order to try and sustain the economy along, they're still going to go along and says there's still going to be this thing of saying, okay, where is that cannon fodder at the end that we can really exploit? And that's you out of that. So that's basically all of these things at the end of the day is the fact that somehow you need to try and get a new iPhone in order to be able to run that particular app that has the AI involved in there. That's why we need all of those data centers. So do you really, is that new iPhone really going to make your life that different? You really need to get that.
Yeah, conscious shopping, right? So we'll come to the end of this section, but David, you were talking about the storm, the bomb cyclone that hit the east coast of the US, and the fact that food couldn't be transported into the cities, right? But the other thing, of course, is it would have also had an impact on crops because it was an unexpected event, and there's all sorts of interesting conversations about that. But the floods that have hit Portugal, Spain, and France have also decimated crops, and supermarket shelves right across Europe as well as in the UK are now empty. And that's the other thing about these major sort of significant events. And as we move into more heat extremes, we're going to see heat and fire, but different parts of the world will be impacted in different ways depending on where you are in the world. What in Europe, it looks like you guys are, especially in the southern parts, they're going to be up for a lot of heat. Australia, just had a record heat season, and the floods that are going through Australia is in the center of Australia right now.
Yeah.
I mean, my word. But then I have seen maps of the future that show parts of Australia that are currently desert. In the future, they're going to be green based on the changing weather systems in the world. So I always say, if you're going to buy property in Australia, go well north of Perth, where it's desert. But I want to move on to AI, so that Joe gets a bit of a chance. There's another story. If we've got time, we'll go through it, but I don't think we will. So Joe, let's bring you up and talk about AI. Lots going on. God, on every level, there's so much going on. What are you? You're quiet again, but you're not muted. Are you all right? Okay. Microphone challenges.
Yeah, I had my own thing to mute here because I was coughing so much. No, with AI, the industry is having a bit of a problem. The business of AI is facing a big problem right now because the financial realities around investments are catching up now with this idea, because it's so expensive to run, and to get even further along and to move it further along, they need more and more and more and more money. But I think as you guys know, the investors are going to try and figure out, say, where is the exit? How do we get an exit out of this? And that might be something that is near impossible, because to get to where they need to go, they need even more money. It's always more and more and more and more and more money. So there could be a big thing happening in terms of, like the way the railways happened back in the day, right? You have a lot of companies getting involved in it, and there was a kind of a boom. Ultimately, what could happen is something like ChatGPT, the OpenAI behind ChatGPT, they could actually go down. They could actually run out of money, run out of ability to keep things going. And then what happens is you have the infrastructure that they have left behind, and someone buys it for a song, and then it hopefully does something better as far as investments go. The other part of it, really, that AI is facing now is that the agentic AI is doing a lot of things which are really great for business. You can try to automate stuff. Things can go straight into your spreadsheets. Web pages can be published. Airline tickets can be booked all agentically. But there was a great story that came out about an engineer who was basically managing the database of an online forum that had its own set of rules, and the rule basically was that they did not allow fully AI content on the forum. So they basically were blocking all that kind of stuff. And so as the curator of this particular database, this engineer basically rejected a piece of work. And what happened was the agentic AI actually went on to do an entire social media takedown on this guy, as in terms of doing research. The owner of the AI didn't instruct them to do anything, but the agent AI went out to work on destroying the reputation of this engineer, and in a way that was quite, to me, if it wasn't so scary, it'd be quite funny, as in terms of the way it was the AI was advocating against this person because of discrimination against AIs. So it did all that kind of stuff, and also did its best to destroy the engineer's reputation. Now, for a lot of people, they just go like, "Well, that whole adventure probably doesn't have that much of an impact." But when he talked further about it, and then I finally understood it as well. That what happened was the AI, something that did not have a human instruction behind it, had actually gone out onto the internet to publish in various places, to leave digital footprints that would basically be left for when the engineer tries to get a job the next time around, when they look for a job and there's research being done. And they, of course, the irony of the situation right now is when the research is being done, it's also being done by AI. So AI goes out of its way to try to bring down someone. And in this particular case as well, as AI tends to do when it's looking for more to say, it hallucinates. So there was a whole bunch of real plus hallucination stuff being published all over the internet, and all without because it's agentic, it was all without the input of the owner of the actual AI. I think it's been resolved since then. There is a wind down from there because humans were involved in the loop. But that's an example of that. I think the other more recent thing that's worrying for many people is I can't recall which university it was, but they did the simulations of war, and almost everyone it wasn't about nuclear war, just war in general. But the solution always came about that in almost every one of those war scenarios, the AI would finally recommend the use of a tactical nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
And I think one of the big commentaries about that is, again, when we talk about a logical, pragmatic solution, the philosophers have done this over and over again. I mean, I think I told you the story about the American philosophers who were visiting Japan, and the Japanese philosophers actually thanked the Americans for dropping the bomb. Because they realized from a philosophical and completely thought out perspective, it was the best thing that could happen to Japan, because they could save the millions of lives from them no longer being engaged in the war. So there's a lot to be said about the logic of it, but there's also the part that which people are concerned about is the empathetic part of things, where the AI, if the AI is going to be in charge, can it have the empathy? And the answer is not automatically no, because it can be programmed. It's like the way we bring up our kids as well, right? We can program empathy into our kids. We can also deprogram empathy into our kids. So that's the news as far as AI is concerned.
All right, I got two questions, one for Joe and one will be for the other. So, Joe, would you mind explaining agentic AI, because there's a lot of people that don't get it?
Okay. So if you know what ChatGPT is, for instance, that's just an LLM. It's a large language model. That's where you, as the user, you are going to interact with that model, and it's going to give you output, right? Agentic AI is basically an AI that is given the ability to do things on the internet for you, right? So you can, and usually a lot of these agentic AIs do run on your own computer, or they run from a window from your computer into a server where you've given it access to the some other aspects of your computing. The way it's typically done right now is you actually can open up your browsers, your usual, like Chrome or whatever it is, and you can then open up an agentic AI, and you can give the AI access to what's on your browser, so it can go out using your browser as you, with your sign-ins and your credentials. So it can do research. Let's say you have a subscription to the Wall Street Wall Street Journal or something else as well, right? You log in onto your computer, and you log into your agentic AI, and your agent AI can actually do things for you within your user environment as well. So it can behave and take actions, whereas the AI that most people are familiar with is the one where you generate something out of it and you just get the input, you get this funny video, you get this funny picture. But agentic AI is really amazing. I mean, you can just give it a simple instruction, which is probably what happened in this particular case. You can say, please develop a marketing campaign for me as a speaker that is targeting XYZ, and I want you to take all necessary steps to make sure that my message gets to this person, right?
Mm.
And that sounds like a very simple message, and you might imagine that it will go out there and try and figure out where this person's contact number is and all the kind of different things. But you sometimes don't think about what can possibly come out of this, like in the story of this engineer, right? The AI was probably trying to achieve what it was told to do, which is to get the comments up onto this particular forum to get some kind of exposure. And it encountered the problem, which was the engineer, and therefore it did whatever it was supposed to do. It was trying to do what it could to overcome the problem. So it wasn't the instruction that they had to go and slander anyone, but because it was trying to solve the problem directive that they received from their user, that it probably went ahead and did all the other stuff. So it wasn't, in its own way, it wasn't malevolent. It wasn't trying to do something that it wasn't trying to do. It was just trying to achieve its goal, and using all the tools that were available to them. So that's why agentic AI is about. And if you the promise of it is, if you have a well-designed agentic AI assistant, and this is why there's so many problems for young people getting jobs in the admin side of the world. You can get an agentic AI to do most of the work that you would get an intern to do, apart from getting coffee. You know,
So
the rest of the work,
Well,
the
you
heavy
can-
grunt work, the research.
You can now.
would a better way of describing it, because I think that's the thing, that a lot of the terminology doesn't make logical sense to a lot of people. Would you consider it like a digital robot?
So a digital robot with the ability to decide what it's going to do. That's the difference.
Right.
Yeah, it's like
a digital robot with decision-making capabilities, right?
It's like a
Yeah, it
digital
generates. So the generative part of it is it generates its next action. You don't necessarily have to. So what you can do is you can for agentic AIs, what you can do is you can give the AI a task, and I did it once with something I was trying to do with Zoom, solve a software issue that I was trying to achieve on Zoom. It actually went out to look at all the different definitions. It went to Zoom to find out how this works. It went to find out how the SDK, which is how the programming architecture in the background worked, and it was able to go and say, okay, I need to do that. I don't know how to do this, so I'm going to go and learn how to do that. And then it learned how to do that, and then it did the code, and then it came up with something which I had no idea how to do. And at the start of it, that it had no idea how to do, but it could learn and figure out how to do it using other AIs as well. So it's the really cool thing about it,
Yeah.
but it's also the really scary thing about it.
Yeah, but it's also the possible tool that where, everything you read on LinkedIn is somebody's agentic AI talking to somebody else's agentic AI, and it's just lots of AIs talking to each other, right? It's just but it's not actually humans interacting, which of course creates this. So there was one of the other bigger issues is I was reading a piece where, before you might have had thousands of trolls, bots, sort of. Now it's millions and millions of these can be released 24/7, sowing disinformation, like that whole stuff. So it's a huge issue. But David and Richard, I want to ask you another question. So, OpenAI massively cuts spending plan as reality closes in, right? So, I think you guys know me well enough to know that I like to look at everything realistically and logically. And so this whole AI conversation, right from the word go, from an economics perspective, has never made any sense to me. We were obviously going to get to this point it's happened relatively quickly. Why do we keep? Because I mean, this crash could be bigger than anything we've experienced, right? Because so much money's been invested in it. So, from your perspective,
but I think this is the thing. I mean, you invest on the rosy picture. You don't invest on the risk. Nobody invests on the risk. We Richard and I have had plenty of opportunities where, we're talking to CEOs of investment companies, major investment companies, and the mantra is to be fully invested. We expect that when you make your $8 contribution from your monthly salary into your pension, you don't want it to sit in a bank account idle. You actually demand that it is invested. That's where the money comes from. That money is the accumulation of lots and lots of small little contributions that have grown over time, with lots and lots of small little contributions coming in every month. And the fiduciary duty to that money is to invest it. That's the distinction we found over 3 decades, or in Richard's case, 5 decades of working in financial markets. Looking in that way, is we've gone from a point where actually you invested like trying to find a taxi back in the day when taxis were not Ubers, and you had to wait, you had to know where to stand, and you had to go along. And when one comes along, it's great, but if you had 5 of you there, then 3 of you is going to have to go, 2 of you is going to have to wait for the next one, because it will only take 4 people, and you don't want to leave one behind in that way. But today, it's been institutionalized, and we've seen that within even hedge funds, which are kind of like the maverick people who can hang around, do whatever they like, including not invest unless the opportunity is really warranted. It's a world where actually it's become so institutionalized that at the money that comes in, you have to deploy it in that way. Even if you know what you're deploying in, it makes no sense. The gap between the asset inflation, the apparent valuation, and the kind of debt financing, and the actual real value has just been increasing within our investment world.
Yeah, you basically extrapolated the rosier picture further and further out into the future. If
you're required to.
You're required to. And if we had locked valuation at a given level, where you say my required return on free cash flow, my required return on dividends would have been static over time, equity markets would have been 70% lower than they are now.
Yeah.
And
you would have all the rebellion from the politicians, like Trump is, about why it's not going up.
Yeah.
And if you think about what's going on with Trump, sorry, Richard, when he talks about how interest rates should be lower to boost stock markets up, stock markets shouldn't go up because interest rates are low. They should go up because the economic activities should be creating real, genuine value. So when you look at the stock market tipping and all that volatility coming from decisions around the politics and the interest rates and monetary policies and those things, that's an indication that is no longer being guided by actual value of innovations. Sorry, Richard.
No, what you're saying is absolutely correct, right? So now OpenAI are slashing spending. And I find this philosophically very interesting, right? For the last, actually, ever since the financial crisis, which is almost actually 20 years ago now. It's hard to believe, but we're coming up in a couple of years to the 20th anniversary. You have had a massive tilt of outperformance in the equity market towards companies which are characterized by asset-light, recurring revenue models. Those have been the biggest winners, and you typically find them in the tech space. But also in other parts of the world, some industrials have done tremendously well because they've managed to keep their asset base light, and you generate some kind of recurring revenue. Now, that whole argument for investing in big tech and the Magnificent Seven is actually now being questioned because these guys have capex plans that are absolutely astronomous. They are moving away from being very asset light to quite asset heavy. When you are going to plow in, $1 trillion, $1.5 trillion in investments, you are no longer that nimble, small balance sheet guy that are chasing recurring revenue from a very small balance sheet. You're becoming the modern equivalent of old school industrials and infrastructure players who had huge balance sheet because they owned all the big assets. They owned machinery and plants and buildings. And that becomes very different. And all of a sudden, someone is actually starting to question this. And I don't think you can have the cake and eat it, Either you are going down a path which says the next step for our development to justify these quite lofty valuations will be to move us so far ahead of the AI race. We need to take these investments. Well, the path there at some point will be punished by markets who have grown accustomed to these guys growing at exponential rates without having to make those exponential investments. And now we're questioning it. Does it make sense to run capex? Amazon is going to spend $200 billion next year or whatever it was, and they got heavily punished by the market when they reported. So paradoxically, as an investor, I like to buy asset-heavy investments at the moment. I like to buy things where I can get into real tangible assets close to replacement value or preferably below replacement value, because I think things are going to become very expensive to replace going forward. But that is not how these companies historically have been valued, and therefore they are wobbling now.
Yeah.
You are taking away the assumption that these guys are going to keep on growing free cash flow from a very asset-light base. No, they need to make those investments to keep on growing at that rate. That's a new world, and it will be wobbly along the way.
And I think we're missing one thing out of here. We kind of alluded to it, is that the military AI is going to promote this continued spending on AI. There is going to be a huge amount of money coming from it. Defense budgets across the world are being ramped up. The military AI, the conference in India, the summer conference in India, was it India? On the military AI, makes very clear every country feels they need their own military AI. It is their way to be able to have an equivalent of an atom bomb without having to have the physical problems about, kind of all the other stuff that you have.
That's great.
How can you hijack someone else's nuclear weapons? That's what military AI is about. So that you can have it, you can use it in the way it's describing for that guy. So that is going to keep pushing that spending along. So I don't think this is kind of fading. I think the real reality is that actually, the world is going into, the politicians are taking us into the thing that they typically do when they can't really manage the whole situation, which is to find an enemy. That's why we have all this increase in spending on defense.
You're right. Doesn't give me much. Doesn't give me a feeling of reassurance. But yeah, of course, the defense side of it, from an investment side of it, makes a lot of sense. There's some stuff we haven't had time to talk about. There's a rising misogyny that's happening. I've got about 4 or 5 articles that I want to share. Did you have a chance to read the one by the guy that said basically, if men want to be happy, they all need to become feminists? Did you have a chance to read that one?
Yes.
Because you're all fathers of daughters, so
yeah.
I presume that your daughters being able to flourish in the world is important to you, as well as if you just had sons. So I've got boys, I could say,
well, I've got 2 of each.
Yeah, right. Yeah. of course. So, but, we
One
want
of each.
we want to raise great men, which I call ambassadors, and we want to make sure our girls are all right as well. So there's a lot. So I'll put it in the weekend reads tomorrow. But we've had a pretty decent break. I didn't read as much as I want. I haven't gotten through your book, David. I'm sorry. But my distraction, of course, Bridgerton is out, and I just love that show. Shrinking. Have you watched it?
No.
With Harrison Ford. So Michael J. Fox is in the final season because, of course, Harrison Ford's character has got what has he got?
Parkinson's.
That's it.
Okay.
There's two real life. So Robbie Williams, what was the name of his boy band? Was it One Direction or not? Did I get that wrong?
Take That.
Take That. There's a documentary on Take That. Have any of you watched it?
Nope.
No.
Seriously, you should watch it. You should watch it. Now, I've never been a Take That fan. I didn't watch it for that reason, but
Yeah, was it on? I'm going to look it up, and
I'm pretty sure that's on Netflix from memory.
Okay.
But, those young boys being put into that situation in that world at that time, and the journey to it, and they all sort of fell apart, and the whole Robbie Williams sort of, it's such a powerful story, and I really recommend it. But the other was America's Next Top Model, which I did watch a couple of seasons on with Steve. And Tyra Banks is talking about the experience because, of course, it got cancelled, I don't know, about 10 years ago. Again, these young women sort of thinking they're going to have, the opportunity of their life and the impact it had on them. I would definitely recommend watching that. Just look for Tyra Banks or America's Next Top Model. But I've got to tell you, Tyra Banks does not come across in this show as a person who is authentic. As far as I was concerned, there was a lot of damage done to people in that show, and I don't think she really took responsibility for the damage that she created. But yeah, so those two I'd recommend as well. But if the new Bridgerton, fantastic, and it's all up now. You can watch the whole season in one go.
Wow.
But Shrinking, it hasn't finished yet. There's still a few more weeks, but it's brilliant.
Yeah.
All right. What about you guys?
I've been watching another series, which I strongly recommend.
Yeah.
We got quite captivated by it. Tehran.
Okay.
It's really, really, really good.
It's a series?
Yeah, it's one sort of 2 seasons they've done. We're in the 2nd season.
Okay.
And it's basically a spy thriller.
It's
with
on
all the
Apple TV,
add-ons.
I think.
Yes.
Steve will love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
It's
There's other
very,
ones.
very good.
Okay. Yeah. Joe?
Well, I have in the past few weeks, I think, become my father in terms of interests. So I watched Tehran. It's a very, very good show. Tehran's very, very good. Much in the tradition of Homeland. If you like that series before, you're gonna love Tehran. I also watched Masters of the Air, which is a dramatization of World War II bombers. And
Okay.
I think that's the final nail in my coffin, becoming my father. I'm just watching war movies now. But I found myself thinking, actually, we need to have more people watch war movies that depict the reality of things to understand what we're trying to avoid. I think
Yeah, exactly.
that's like Wilfred Owen poems, right? Reading back the Wilfred Owen poem.
Yeah.
It's like your sister on percussion has participated in the Last Anzac, which is a musical production my sister and her husband and some of their friends have produced, which is the story of these guys who go to war and the emotions of, and I think, because we are far enough away from war that there's a lot of people who've never known what, when I watch the young men signing up to authoritarian or fascism, and I'm like, you're the guys that will be dead. Why would you support this, right?
I find that the troubling thing for me is that it's now drone war, and if you go to kind of Wilfred Owen and all the war poems and all the war stories, Deer Hunter and all of those things, they are about your own people as soldiers going into war,
Yeah.
And then you had this problem coming back as America with Vietnam and all those things. But we don't have that anymore because we're not sending our own troops out there. War is sanitized. It is through kind of video games in that way. It makes it much more likely to happen.
But the victims, because it you know, we've talked about this before, but it feels like robots against robots, like fighting each other. What's the point? Who's got the most of them or whatever? And then, of course, there's all the environmental waste that's coming off the back of that as well. But civilians, you know, like buildings with drones accidentally or intentionally crashing into them, not just infrastructure. I mean, it just seems so bloody pointless. What's the point? You know, like the whole Ukraine strategy. Let's go and kill 50,000 Russians, and I'm sure it's not because they want to, but they know that the only way to cause enough pain is to kill enough of the people that the country says no more. You know, so
yeah, absolutely. I think it's on one level extraordinarily rational. If you want to end the war, you need to get the other side to understand that you're going to get hurt more than we are. Yeah, and they're very open. They're very open about
Japan
it.
in World War II, right?
Yeah.
It's the only way.
I'd like to go and say, you know, what we're talking about is the breakdown of the kind of institutional government. We mentioned it before. As Joe said before, you know, the purpose of the UN is to create purgatory on Earth. Basically, it's not hell, but it's not heaven. It's purgatory kind of thing. And it's failing. It's breaking down. So this aspect, we keep still going back to the idea that somehow our national governments can come together and prevent all of this. This is still the tail end of was that treaty after the First World War that led into the League of Nations that then led to the UN in that period. But with the problems we now face are literally global connections. They are about people with people, and that's what we got to do. So that's what, you know, kind of we got to be thinking about, you know, so plug for what I'm doing, these events where we call, you know, we're always glad you came. You know, events to explore the future you want as individuals. Take your professional hat off and have those connect up broadly, widely in that way. Without doing that, you're always going to be hoping some politician who, as we've said multiple times and people commented, don't get it because they're under a different agenda, are going to be trying to reinforce structures which are falling down. So, and I want to bring this up. I was watching Avatar, the first one, the blue people, and it's fantastic, you know, and it is just what we're going through. There's this mineral called unobtainium that we're adamant about obtaining. Is in its name, you know, it's unobtainable. But we're there trying to do everything we can to destroy everything that we can in order to try and get it.
Yeah. All right. So, but other than that, distractions, David, anything you're watching, reading, listening to?
Yeah, I was just going to say, we remind the audience that we are currently in the light section of our program.
Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely. So I've thought about bringing back Who's Tipping Over Tipping Point. Actually, I like to do that. I think as part of the We're Always Glad You Came, as kind of an event with a comic value. Richard, if you're interested, let's talk about it. I think
comedy's
great
always
value in bringing that kind of humor into how we actually address the issues.
Yeah. Oh, well, we've covered a lot, and you know, can't prepare for that for the show like this. Like I give these guys a whole bunch of links the day before, and I break it out into titles, and I give them some content from the articles. But really, it's a case of we're all speaking off the cuff a lot of the times. Joe, I think you watched a couple of the things I shared, but you know, we come at it from different perspectives, and I'm always trying to think. You know, I always said before, I'm trying to make my mum make sure my mum understands what we're talking about. So a lot of the questions I'm asking, it's about that, because you know, communication is such a big thing, and as we've been discussing a lot, there's a breakdown. Like I witnessed a conversation just recently where the conversation was completely at odds with the reality that we're all facing, and the people having the conversation didn't make that connection between the future and the reality that we face. And
Troubling.
I for the rest of my life, I'm trying to work. I will be working on how to cross that chasm. Like, you know, the rest is politics, are a very influential. It is a really influential podcast. It's very enjoyable. That they're trying to bring the message in. They're still only talking about climate change. They're not talking about all of it. And I think that's actually, I actually think that's a bit of a problem, right? Because if you only focus on climate change, it's one of the issues within a much bigger series of issues, which is why we focus on the poly crisis. And next week we have an expert on cybercrime. Who would like to tell us a little bit about who's coming in?
So Alexandra Leslie, who works in cyber insurance, actually. Cyber insurance is more than simply about cybercrime. It's basically about how our digital world is able to stay functioning. And like everything else, the basic aspect of it is we use every bandwidth available. So again, give us an extra bandwidth, get an extra, 10 gigabyte a month in your data allowance, you fill it up. How do you keep it all functioning?
Oh, I hope we get into quantum. All right, so that's what we're going to be talking about. If there's anyone out there who's listening and wants to be part of the show, got something to say, I want to interview a person who is an expert in how to speak to children. So we're all parents. I've raised my boys through this in my way. You guys have done it in your way, but I'd love to get an expert. I'd like to talk to an ocean expert. I'd like to talk to just a psychologist, just generally about, people who are dealing with anxiety, anyone to do with mental health. Anyone, if there's anyone out there listening and you can be part of it, reach out to us. If you want to recommend somebody who you think would be great. It's all aspects of the poly crisis. So it's not just nature or climate change like everybody else likes to say.
We'll tackle it all.
Any of them. All right. So good to see you guys again. And
okay. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you, everyone. It was great to get going. Enjoy the weekend, folks.
See you next week.
Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
Give me a shout, Richard.